At Octagram, we specialize in getting pricing and underwriting insights from data. So we have seen a lot of data from the largest billion-dollar carriers to the smallest MGAs. And from that experience, we have come up with a wish list of 4 types of data that you probably don't have, but we really wish you did have, so that we can get you the competitive insights that you're looking for. So here they are. Number 1 is being able to match a claim to an exposure. So I'll explain what I mean by this. So let's say you're an auto carrier and you have on a policy 2 vehicles and 2 drivers, and you have a claim. Now, which vehicle and which driver were associated with this claim? Quite often, a carrier can't tell us, and they can't tell us at scale so that we can attach every single claim to a particular driver and vehicle. Now, this is a problem not just related to auto carriers, it spans lots of different businesses. So for example, if you're writing commercial property, you might have a schedule of locations, but you can't assign a claim to one of those locations on your schedule at scale. So it is reasonably pervasive. Now, if you can't actually assign claims to exposures, you're going to have to do your analysis at the policy level, and that can be suboptimal. So I'll give you an example. So going back to our auto insurance example, let's say on your policy you have 2 drivers. One is 20 years old and one is 60 years old. So we're going to take an average so that we can do something at the policy level and say the average age of drivers on this policy is 40. And we're going to lump this policy in with all the other policies that actually have 40-year-old drivers. So you can see that the insights that we're going to get from this are going to be really muddy and not very, frankly, not very competitive. So why does this happen? Well, have a think about what needs to happen to actually be able to assign a claim to an exposure at scale. Essentially, within your claim system, the claims handler has to be able to access a unique list of exposures that is in sync with the underwriting system. And this doesn't often exist. That's because for this to happen, essentially someone in the claims organization has to have prioritized this as an update to their claim systems. And look, claims is really concerned about getting to good outcomes, and that's what they're going to invest in when it comes to their systems. This particular thing is not about getting to good claims outcomes. It's about getting underwriting insights at scale. So it's not a natural one for a claims organization to prioritize. To really get this to happen, you need a pretty thoughtful data strategy and data governance organization to prioritize this for the whole organization and to find funding for it. Okay, now let's have a look at the second thing that we wish you had, and that is a clean cause of loss. So look, most carriers and MGAs will capture the cause of loss, but unfortunately, it's probably going to be blank or unknown or missing or other more often than you'd like, say 10%, 20%, even I've seen 50% of the time, right? And this is a problem for a few reasons. So quite often you're going to be doing your analysis by cause of loss. Let's take property insurance. The drivers of risk for fire versus water are very different, and you're going to want to do your analysis for those 2 different risks. So if you don't know what caused a particular loss, you're going to just have to throw those claims out, unfortunately. So why this one particular field and focusing on the quality of this data for this one particular field versus all the other fields we could have chosen across underwriting and claims? I will say this is the one data point that time and time again I've seen just stop an analysis in its tracks, right? Particularly if it's just something, a cause you've never captured before, like hail, right? We just never coded that properly before, and now we need to know because we have a hail deductible. It's also the one data point that I've actually had to fill in by hand for hundreds, if not thousands of claims in order to just do our analysis. So it is incredibly important. Now, why is it missing? There are many, many different reasons in different organizations why this may not be filled in the way you'd like it to be filled in. And I'll give you an example, right? Like maybe it's because at first notice of loss, someone actually does try to fill this in. But at that time, you're not sure what the loss, the cause of loss actually is, and so you pick other quite a lot, right? You just pick other. Now, maybe down the line, 30 days later, you actually do know what the cause of loss is, but no one ever goes back in and changes that, right? And look, the list goes on. It could be many different reasons. And obviously, depending on the reason, you have many, different ways of improving how this is filled in. But the one universal thing I would recommend is you should track. You should track how well this is filled in, right? What is the percentage of unknowns or not availables or others? And you should hopefully, make someone accountable to see this percentage go down over time. The third type of data that we wish you had is having good submission data along with any prior loss information that you ask them to fill in. So, when you have someone actually, send in a submission, quite often you're asking for the last, say, 3 years of loss. Even better if you're asking them to fill it in by year. You should save that information. If you save that information, you have significantly expanded the data set that you have for analysis. Right? So for example, if you only bind, say, 20% of the stuff that comes across your desk, then you have just 5x the data that you have for insights. Because you can actually treat that submission data and the prior losses as having like a bound book with loss data set, right? So you can use it to do things like confirm any sort of tentative analysis that you have on your own book of business, right? Let's say you don't have enough data, you're not sure, you can use the submission data to see if, yes, this is a driver of loss. You can also use this data to actually have insights for business that you don't write, right? So if that exists within your submission data, you can actually mine that for data-driven insights. Why is this commonly missing? Well, basically, folks do try to invest in getting and storing and curating data for their bound book of business, but by the time it comes to the submissions, quite often there's just no funding for it left. So, which I would understand. So that's why it's commonly missing. And also, what you can do about it, right? Being thoughtful and thinking about the value that you can actually get from your submission data. Lastly, number 4 on our wish list is having a good instant read of a customer loss ratio. Obviously, it's going to be helpful to have a clean, instant whole account view of a customer because so many of your strategies for profitable growth is going to revolve around this whole customer view. Now, this is even more challenging in commercial lines because customers, they split up, they have M&As, they have subsidiaries, so it can get complicated. However, even for carriers who have actually invested in figuring out this complexity and having a unique customer ID, the mistake I see there is assuming that once you've invested in that, that you will have sort of a clean customer loss ratio forever. And that is unfortunately not the case. This gets really dirty really quickly, and so the advice I have for you is just always assume that you will need to consistently feed and water your unique customer ID to just maintain it and keep it usable over time. So I hope this is helpful. Look, broadly speaking, this sort of data is missing because carriers and MGAs spend data on operations firstly, right? Making sure they can issue policies, close claims, fair enough. Then they'll spend money on making sure they have data for financials, making sure you can produce a monthly P&L, for example. And then thirdly, unfortunately, is data for insights. And just having data to run your business and produce a P&L does not mean that you have data for insights. And that is probably the common thing about the 4 types of data I've just talked about, is that you don't need them for ops, you don't need them for your P&L. You do need them to actually have good underwriting insights. So just my takeaway is don't forget about this type of data. Don't assume that because you have the data you need to run your organization from day to day, that you have the data you need for good pricing and underwriting insights, because unfortunately you're going to need to make a little bit more extra special effort for that. Thanks for watching. If you want to read more about this topic, we have a blog post on our website, octagramanalytics.com. I'll put a link in the show notes below. And look, subscribe if you want more content on pricing in P&C insurance. Thanks.